one of the most original and most brilliant of the new crop of young American fiction writers. He's a man of many talents. He's a founder of a literary publication company called Dr. Cicero. He's a novelist, screenwriter, and director of many award-winning movies. He's also a great professor. He taught, the reason I call him a great professor is because I was once a student of his at Kingsborough Community College. He taught creative writing. He has also taught writing at Universidad de las Americas in Mexico, and also at Universidad de Montevideo in Uruguay, and St. Xavier's College in Mumbai. To learn more about the person I am about to speak with today, we can visit his website called knowyourbaker.com. Today, it is my pleasure to speak with Professor John M. Keller. How are you doing, Professor?
I'm doing all right. And I really appreciate you taking the initiative to invite me to talk to you. And I just want to say you're also, as a student, one of the great pleasures was working with you. I mean, I think teachers, we do what we do because we hope that sometimes we'll come across a student like you.
Wow, thank you, thank you. So where are you at right now, Professor?
I'm in Mississippi. I'm in the South. This is my parents' house. This is where I'm working right now. I'm doing my my classes online here. These are my mom's books.
Not yours.
No. These are my books, but this is, in a way, I feel like this is, these are the books that nourished me when I was younger. And even just being surrounded by books is kind of like a great pleasure, really. I mean, obviously what's inside the books are important too, but just having books is I think, such a nice thing, really.
So you lived in Mississippi, throughout?
Mississippi, this is where my family came later. I actually grew up in Texas, and they came here just more recently. And this is where they've kind of established their house now. But I grew up in Texas.
Great. And you've been to a lot of places in the world. Yeah, I see Mexico, Uruguay, and Mumbai, New York. You travel a lot, don't you?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Like you. I like getting out of the country. I think it all started when I moved for the first time from a small town in Texas to West Texas to El Paso. And then I was on the border of Mexico, and there it's like a large Mexican community, Mexican American community. And it was really, you had the border right next to the city. So the downtown of Juarez, Mexico is actually connected to the downtown of El Paso, Texas, which a lot of people don't realize. So you could be standing in the downtown El Paso, and you're just looking across you can just look across the border, and you're seeing the downtown of Mexico. And I think from that point in my life, I realized that the world, it was just too exciting to think that there's another country just right there. And I think just interacting with people from Mexico and just like realizing there's a world out there, it sort of got the travel bug into me from a young age. So yeah.
And what age is that? How old were you then?
Okay, so I moved there when I was 12. Yeah.
So you decided to start traveling and exploring the world.
I didn't start traveling the world at that point, but I think that once I realized there was something else out there that I was just intrigued by, and also just foreign languages as well. When I was living there, I worked. My first job was working for a beer distributor. We would just like bring beer to convenience stores and sell them, and distribute beer. And I learned Spanish by doing that. Because all the people who I was working with were Spanish speaking. So I think just like another language, and then suddenly I was just wanting to travel everywhere, really.
How many languages do you speak now?
I speak Spanish, Portuguese, French, English, and Italian. Wow. My Italian, the other ones, but yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So let's get to the thick of everything. Your novels. Do you remember stories in your novel? Like if I was to ask a name, if I was to tell you a name of a novel, would you be able to summarize, what was in it?
I don't know that I would know necessarily the names of all the characters, but I think
Uh-huh.
generally I know. I mean, I know what the books are about, and I remember them pretty well.
And you still remember?
Sorry.
And you still remember them?
I still remember them. I think there are probably characters that I wouldn't be able to say what their names were, but if you read something out from it, I would be able to remember. I did look at Johnny Allen a little bit this morning before, just to remind myself, and there were things that I completely forgot. But I mean, I remember them for the most.
All right, so I would test your knowledge right now.
Oh no.
So, Know Your Baker. I think that was your first, book.
Yeah, that was my first novel.
So
I
what?
wrote that 23, and yeah, it's about it's actually about an artist who kills himself or goes missing. They're not really sure because they don't have the body, and he paints a kind of what they think is a suicide note, because he paints himself. He paints the room from the view of a painting as if the painting were a mirror. And if you look into the painting, it's like looking into a mirror and seeing the reflection of the room behind you, except that
he's not there.
He's not there. He didn't paint himself into the painting. So that's kind of the story, the way the story opens. And then it eventually becomes a story about the murder of a number of women in, it's a true story. A murder of actually thousands of women in Mexico, right in the border town where I lived. And so that was kind of the main reason why I decided to write that story, is because actually I knew about this story, but not many people outside of the place where I lived knew about it. So I felt like it was a an important story to tell. So yeah, that was my first book, Know Your Baker.
Right.
Yeah.
And you did a lot of research in that book of knowing the story and engaging with it. Yeah.
I did.
How was that?
First of all, I mean, a lot of the research was just living in El Paso, living in that area, and spending a lot of time in Juarez also. But yeah, I mean, you had to do the research. I did a lot of interviews with a lot of people who were involved as journalists who were writing the stories. They were on the front lines writing the stories, like day to day, like this person was murdered on this day, and so forth. So I kind of compiled a lot of that information together, and then I forgot about it. Like, I think. Anyway, my technique is, as a researcher, you do all the research, you read it all, and then afterwards you try to forget about it, because then you have to tell the story. So that's kind of, it's there hanging in the background. But yeah,
you planted it into your subconscious.
This is right. This is important. And something we've talked about a lot, you and me, right?
Yeah. But so let's go to the next book. Yeah. So called The Box and the Briefcase, The Moleki and the Old Man, and the First Coming and the Second of God. Wow, that's a mouthful.
I'm sorry about that. From a time when I was writing stories, my stories were all like long titles. I don't know why I was doing that. I've gotten a little bit more over time, but yeah. Don't ask me why that book is called that. I'm not really. I mean, I do know why, but it's
it's a long story.
It's a long title. I think I was attracted by also the idea of a very long title.
All right. So what is that story about? Do you remember?
That story, if I remember correctly, is about a woman who's living in a gated community in between Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. And it's a community that doesn't exist. It actually exists in the future. So it's a novel that takes place in 3 times. It takes place in the 1950s, 2000s, and 2050s. None of those dates are actually put in the book. And the part that takes place kind of in the future is about this girl who grows up in a gated community where, in order to be allowed to go into the community, you have to meet a physical standard. You have to meet the standard of beauty of that community. And in order to, if you don't already meet that standard, you have to actually have plastic surgery in order to fit in. And so she's one of the first generations of people who's actually grown up entirely in that community. And she finds it oppressive and she wants to see the world outside of that place, kind of like me in Texas wanting to get out. So she leaves, and she's one of the first persons to ever actually leave the community, because you're not allowed to leave once you've checked in. So that's kind of her story. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very interesting. I think I should pick that up next. So the next, and Paulo, that's in Brazil, right?
Yeah, Sao Paulo is Brazil, and Rio de Janeiro. It's like the two biggest cities I think they're the two biggest cities of Brazil. I think Sao Paulo is something like 32 million, at least when I left, and Rio is something like 16 million. So these are cities that are bigger than New York by, bigger than New York by several times.
Do you know favela?
Yeah, the favelas are a big part of the book also.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, because favelas are generally, it's interesting because in a lot of American cities, you have, if you're living on top of the mountain, you're kind of looking over the city, you've got a great view. In Brazil, the people who are living up on top of the mountains are the people who are living in favelas, which are typically for housing. I mean, a lot of favelas, they're not part of the zoning of the city. So they're illegal encampments that are up on the mountains. And so it's interesting. Actually, they're very beautiful if you look at them from the city below. You look up and they're kind of like these,
just mounted.
Yeah,
I've seen pictures of it before.
Aesthetic about it, something nice about it.
Yeah, there's a lot outside United States. That's why I've been thinking about traveling too. But we'll see though.
Well, I'm always surprised because for me, traveling became something very natural that I started doing very young, and I never really thought of it as being something like a crazy thing to do, because you just get a ticket and you go, and you get on a plane, you arrive somewhere else. If you can afford it, you stay. You stay wherever you can stay at a youth hostel. It's not that expensive. But I'm always surprised, because that was my instinct at a young age, and I didn't have a lot of money either. But that was my instinct, was to travel. Whereas now I see a lot of young people, they don't move around as much as I did, or as much as I think other people. Maybe it's just the people that I've met, but it seems like it's such an easy thing to do, and a great way to, especially for a writer. Of course, for you've already lived in multiple countries, so you're also probably feel like it's not that big of a deal, right?
I actually think it's a big of a deal, because I think it's my personality. I want like structure. I want to know where I'm going to be at. Then like I think because traveling is more of like diving into something new, unexplored territory. So I'm trying to get past that, in trying to explore beyond, where I'm at right now. So I think it's interesting that it comes natural to you. I think that's really interesting, because even thinking about traveling to another country seems like a burden to me, honestly.
Right. Interesting.
So, like, where should I start from? Should I go to a hotel? How do I get my food? Right.
Right. I think maybe I just didn't know any better. I didn't know that it was, I didn't even think that far into it. Maybe I was
You're
more
doing your thing.
But because I'll figure it out,
Right.
But I mean, there's always, and in fact, in many ways, you're living in New York. In many ways, traveling to another, like, easier because it's not as expensive as New York, and you can always find a place to stay. And when you're in your early 20s, you can, you meet people and you stay on their couch, really. Right. You just find people who are your age along the way, and who are happy to, put somebody up. I mean, I also slept outside a couple of times too. So it's
really,
like,
that will make you see the world differently.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some very expensive hotels in like the Netherlands, where like in the hostels there, like $40 or $50 a night. So that gets too expensive. So in that case, you might find another way to spend the night. I mean, that's what I did.
That's cool. That's very cool. Your next book, abracadabrantesque. I'm not pronouncing that properly.
That's pretty good, actually. Abracadabrantesque. That's it. It's a word I found in a magazine, and I just liked the look of the word. I didn't even. I just liked the sound of it, and I thought, yeah, this sounds like an interesting word. And I looked it up, and then it kind of went from there. And it sort of fits into what I was trying to say in the book.
Which is
I don't know. I don't know. It sort of fits the idea without. I mean, I do know what I was trying to say in the book, but I don't think it's very obvious how the title connects to the story. And it's the one story you're asking me what stories are about. It's the one story that I couldn't tell you. I know exactly what it is, and I don't know that I really. As I was writing it, I didn't know that I ever really understood it entirely. I mean, obviously you have flashes of understanding of what you're writing, but that one was the first book that I wrote that I felt like I was going beyond just like a theme,
right.
and writing
We're
something
going beyond even your conscious thoughts. It was just something, and we're just following it. We're following your intuition.
Thank you. That's exactly what it was. I mean, you really explain. That's without even. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I was kind of exactly as you're saying. It was kind of as if the book was written by my subconscious, or it was coming from deeper, and it didn't. It was coming from that place where language itself is not always completely formed.
Yes.
So it's amorphous. I can never really put it down and explain to anybody what it is exactly, but it's, I was happy with how it turned out. It felt like something truer in a way to me. And it definitely felt for me like an evolution, part of an evolution as a writer, like moving away from something that's easier to understand to something a little bit different.
Evolution of the writer. That's great. The last story and the novel we're going to really, speak mostly about, which is what I read, the novel I read, Johnny Allen.
Yes.
Johnny Allen. Let me speak on Johnny Allen a little bit.
Good.
I didn't prepare for this, but yeah. But the story was a really brilliant story. I thought the narrator, which is Allan, right? There's a story of his parents, of his mother dying first, right? Then his father committing suicide.
Yeah.
That really, how does one live with that?
Yeah.
Right? Then he meets Amelia. He meets his wife. Then they both meet a friend called Allan, Johnny Allen, and then Johnny Allen cheats. No, Johnny Allen cheats on Allan, the narrator, with Amelia.
Yeah.
So, and your style of writing was, it was art. It was something to behold, and I was really happy to read the book. It was very transformative, and I've thought about this part a lot, and how the book made me feel. Yeah, so that's a lot of what is it called?
No, I really appreciate
unstructured speaking, but yeah, I hope my point is passed across.
No, it is, and it means a lot coming from you. I mean, you summarized the book exactly right. That's the story. They meet Johnny in Queens. The narrator goes through a lot. It's kind of in the backdrop, that part. Obviously, the relationships between the three of these characters gets very embroiled. Becomes
very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean.
Yeah. Allan is a character.
Johnny Allen?
Yeah, he's a character. And he was from Guinea, right?
Yeah, he was from Guinea. So West Africa.
All right. So in the book Johnny Allen, the narrator mentioned that greatness seeks you out, not the other way around. Do you still believe this? Because it is my belief that greatness must be earned through hard work. So do you still believe that greatness seeks one out, not the other way around?
want to say that I like your rendition of it, that greatness comes through work, because I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't know. I mean, this is Allan, so that's my character. I don't know if I believe that necessarily. I think I do believe that that you can't seek out greatness and become great. I feel like, and this is kind of part of the book as well, is that you have these people who are, that everyone, it seems like, not everyone, but a lot of people around us these days are seeking greatness, and they're seeking greatness through, this immortalization through, Instagram or social media and things like that. I feel like the greatest people in our history, really, a lot of those people are not seeking greatness. The greatness kind of descends on them. And I sort of agree with you. I think that it comes through becoming passionate about something in particular. Yeah, and the hard work that's involved in that, which a lot of people don't necessarily see. So I think that's what the narrator was kind of saying about Johnny, because Johnny, unlike a lot of the other people from his generation, he wasn't really seeing himself. He wasn't really looking and examining himself. He was just kind of himself. He was himself. So he wasn't seeking greatness. So I think that that's what the narrator was trying to say, is that maybe he had it in him, and that those who are all out there trying really hard to become famous and things like that, that maybe they're not going to achieve something called greatness. I think that's what he was trying to say. I don't know. What do you think?
So
yeah,
I kind of want to summarize, what you said. So you said, like, it was in him, it was in Allan, but he hasn't realized that yet, that there's something that, like, he didn't realize his potential yet, right?
Right.
But then there's this group of, the people that are seeking this greatness, and right. So there's a group of people seeking greatness, and there's this group that haven't realized the greatness.
Right.
I haven't realized the potential, but they seem to have this thing about them that makes you think, oh, this person is different.
Right. And I think in this case, Johnny was like, even though he hadn't yet achieved anything close to greatness, I don't think he was looking.
No, he wasn't.
Everyone around him saw that there was something interesting about him.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they weren't even able to say what that was, but there was something about him where he was just living life, or maybe he was open to certain experiences, or maybe he was moving in a certain direction that seemed like that direction was the path. It was a greater path, let's say. I mean, even greatness is such a big idea, really. And when you're writing a story, you always use hyperbole. You try to exaggerate things. So greatness, we're making big statements about greatness. But if he was moving toward his taking steps in that direction, just like being open to experience. And I think that's also why, because the story begins with him breaking his cell phone, right? And he didn't replace it. I mean, most people would. Most people would just get a new cell phone, right? But he doesn't, because he suddenly sees something in that new reality of not having a cell phone that he says, okay, there's something interesting there, and he's willing to go with it. So I think maybe the other thing about greatness is also, moving in a different direction from everybody else.
Everybody else, yeah.
Moving in your own direction, whatever that.
Yeah, I think that is something I've actually recently discovered. I think discovering it through college, interestingly, of like, seeing different ideas, and of course, being your student, then I could see, this part that I never thought, I could, go into.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. Throughout the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of, trying to, like, find out who I am, and to do that, I had to, just cut myself off a little bit and try to understand who I was. Then I would, during this time of trying to do that, I would go back to when I was younger,
Interesting.
And how I used to think when I was younger. And I would write when I was younger, but that kind of, like, I never really thought about it until when I became a student, and I said, oh wow, I would, yeah. So Yeah, greatness, greatness.
Yeah,
What do you think about success? I mean, that
yeah,
that isn't the right question. How does one achieve success in your mind?
yeah. Well, I mean, success. Exactly right. What is success? Where what we all have different definitions of it.
Right.
I think a lot of people would say success has something to do with money, right? Or achieving status or something like that, prestige, maybe. I don't know. I think success in many ways is having time. It really is just having time to be able to do the things you want to do, to devote it to your passions.
Mhm.
Um, Success, I think, is generally the way we see success in the U.S. I feel is more of a burden. People don't really realize that. So, in other words, having a huge high profile. I mean, having a high profile today is just such a dangerous thing, really, because it seems like you have to be really careful about how you speak and just be really careful all the time. It seems like money and things like that come with a lot of responsibility. So for me, success is doing what you want to do. Uh, being close to people, the closest people to you, being around them. Being healthy. I don't know. Those seem like the things that are most valuable to me. I don't know if that's exactly what success is. What do you think?
So I think success success is subjective, you
Yeah,
know, you know,
right.
you do know about Earl Nightingale? He defined success as an acquisition of a worthwhile goal,
Okay,
something that is worthwhile to a person.
right.
So so that differs from a person to person. So yeah. So that's what I think success is.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, let's go. Towards the end of the book, you talked about hipsters, and I've always thought them to be interesting people.
yeah.
So my question to you is, what happened to the hipsters?
All right. So I want to know this. Do you think that the hipsters have disappeared? Maybe they have.
No, I was actually watching a short documentary about the hipster movement. There's a
Yeah.
lot of there was one, I think it's called Purple culture in Costa Rica. You see
Okay.
like this group of people living by themselves, like a whole community,
Yeah.
living in nature. They do things together. They've created like a whole society.
Yeah.
So I think so if hipster living is alternative living, right? Living away from the modernity, living away from society as it is now.
Right.
So hipsters, yeah. So what do you
Yeah.
think about them?
I think first of all, and I also, when I was writing this book, I think hipsterism was such a force. Like in 2013, which is when I wrote this book,
Mhm.
hipsterism was at its peak, and like everybody was talking about hipsters all the time. It's like, oh, you're such a hipster. This guy's a hipster. They would, it was kind of like a way to identify somebody very quickly. It's like a shorthand. So it's interesting you say what happened to the hipster, because I could almost say the same thing. Like, well, where did these guys go? Like, you don't hear. I don't think you hear people talking about hipsters as much as they did then. Is that
Mm.
how you kind of like? You don't hear the word hipster all the time.
I mean, I didn't know what hipster
Okay,
hipster was until I came to America. So yeah, yeah,
yeah,
so
that's
that's
true.
uh-huh.
You came to America in what year?
I think 5 years ago.
5 years ago. Okay, so maybe the whole hipster thing was on its way out. But
Mm.
in 2013 in New York City, if hipster was like one of the most popular words and
Mm.
identifier person at that time period. So it's funny. It's also funny how quickly these terms kind of come and go. But even before, I think hipster. I first heard the term hipster when I moved to New York, which was in 2002,
Mhm.
and then it became. I mean, the word hipster just became more and more popular. What is a hipster? That's a tricky thing. Now, that's one of the things that I was trying to figure out in the book. Also, is I wanted to, in some ways, I mean, I don't think writers should really, or at least me as a writer, I don't like to define things.
Mhm.
I like to use words and put them in context. I don't like to say this is what this is. So I think part of what Amelia is doing in the book and Allan, the narrator, are doing is they're trying to define this word, but actually they find that this word itself is too big to be defined. To
Mhm.
be and what a hipster is, actually, it depends. It's kind of subjective too.
Subjective.
But I think their idea of hipster, at least Allan's idea of hipster, which is partially a result of how Amelia thinks about hipsters, because Amelia is offended by hipsters. She's upset by them because she feels like hipsters aren't really living life. She feels like hipsters are living life, but then they're trying to do things that are interesting. They're not like trying to do things. They're trying to do things to be interesting. I think that's kind of the way that she presents it. And also they have this tendency to do things and also document them at the same time. Would not be hipsterism, really. And as she says later in the book, I think she says hipsterism really is not just the hipster crowd. It's now all of us. We're in a way, we've all sort of become hipsters, I guess, in the definitions that she's using there. So then, does Johnny Allan fit into that? Maybe not, because he's not really aware of himself. I'm not even sure he's trying to figure out who he is necessarily.
It's just being.
Yeah, he's just being.
Yeah.
So I think she appreciates him in that way, because he's just being who he is. Whereas actually Allan, the narrator, her husband, maybe even more of a hipster than anybody else, because he's actually living a kind of hipster life in the way that he's listening to the old records. He's gonna he gets he gets the mustache, the hipster mustache, and things. So yeah, that's definitely something that I feel like that whole idea was something that the book was feeding on because it was around. So it almost felt like as these characters are analyzing the culture that's around them, hipsterism was a huge force in that. So I think that term sort of became part of the book as a result.
Interesting. Whilst I was reading your book, there was this way in your book. It was complex enough to keep me intrigued and to keep me reading and to keep me want to go back and understand, certain parts of what you were trying to say, as what the narrator was trying to say, right? Then it was simple enough for me to read, to flow through the book. Did you intend to do this from the beginning of your work, or did that just come natural as you wrote?
I would have to say that, I definitely do spend a lot of time thinking of style and and the tone of a particular book. But generally I feel like these kinds of things are just, that's the writer in a way. It's like over sort of just, you sort of just write the way you do. So in terms of complexity and simplicity, I have over time, when I was a younger writer, like when I was in my early 20s, I was all about the big word. And even younger, I was that guy in high school who was like always saying the word that you're like, what does that mean? Because I just found it the night before in a book that I'd read. And I felt like living life and being a writer was all about words. And I still do, actually, in many ways. So I think this is kind of a combination of those two things. I still have all those words in me, but I'm usually trying not to use them as much as possible and trying to say things more and more. And the more I write, and even more since I wrote Johnny Allan and since I've written other stuff, I'm trying more and more to say things simply, and not always being successful because I still have this other writer inside me who's just excited by all these the myriad words that exist, all these different. And you're the same way too.
Yeah, I am.
I know how affected you are by words. I mean, there's so much power there.
Yeah. Yes. I have I have a dictionary of words I just list down.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you about that. In the book Johnny Allan, you use a lot of words that I had to write down, which I love definitely because I'm trying to build my vocabulary. Yeah. Because I'm trying to build my vocabulary. So how did you amass so much knowledge of words? Did you have a technique, a practicing technique?
Well, I probably did some of the things you did. I mean, I at some points I did write down words and make lists and things like that. I mean, not always. And I always surrounded myself by people who thought language was important and who used interesting words as well. And then in other languages as well, just being attracted to sounds and so forth, just, you know. Yeah, so I did some of the same kind of techniques that you're talking about, and then just reading a lot, you know, reading as much as I could. I would try to, you know, I wasn't somebody who skipped a word if I didn't know what it meant. I always tried to look it up. So I guess you just sort of like accrue a dictionary.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Speaking about words or books, what books have you recommended the most, you think? Or book?
Well, we talked about James Baldwin, right? So he's definitely an important writer to me. As we were talking about before, the tenor, just the I don't know. There's something about his language, his sentences that really corporealize something. You know, they embody something that I feel
more
like
than the word, more than the sentence itself.
Yeah, more than the sentence itself. There's like a tone. There's something that they've found, some sound that they've found that exists out there that, you know, nobody has really put down on the page before. So that's, for me, Baldwin is a hero, and I always recommend him because I feel like people can read him and grasp what he's saying, and he's writing about important issues, and he's writing always from a perspective that does not exist in our culture. It's always his perspective. It's always something to go. Another writer I've recently recommended more and more, just because I've read all of his novels recently for an interview that I did in this magazine you were talking about, in Dr. Cicero, the writer called Javier Marias, who I now find myself not just recommending, but also buying copies of his book and giving to people so that they'll read them. So that
how do you spell his name?
It's Javier, Javier, and then Marias, Marias.
And I can find him on Dr. Cicero?
You can find him, an interview I did with him in Dr. Cicero, the literary magazine. So I did an interview with him, and I read his I think something like 17 novels in order to prepare for the interview. And for me, he's just one of the most refreshing and interesting voices out there. So I recommend him sometimes. Yeah, those are two of the ones that I recommend.
In your response, you talk about important issues. So, I just want to ask, what do you think are the important issues of now, you know, of this current, like, you know, kind of atmosphere we're in right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I wouldn't speak to what fiction writers should do. I would just say that I'm, for some reason, drawn to writing about contemporary times. Like, I like to write in the present. I don't do a lot of historical. I don't, like a lot of writers, they'll only write about things that happened in the past. So I'm really also interested in culture. So like hipsters, for example, or whatever the latest thing is. I always feel like I'm responding to that, and that fiction gives me a chance to respond to those things. Yeah. So important issues. I mean, I don't know why I felt this way, but I've always written a book. Every book that I've written has always had something to do with something that is important that's going on, or important to me that's going on right now, that I'm kind of reacting to through fiction.
What topics are you following right now? Is there a specific topic that you're just looking at?
Let's see. I've written something about that takes place in the era of COVID. I just wrote a screenplay that takes place in the present time. So that's connected to that.
And that's coming out?
Sorry?
Is that coming out soon?
No, it's a screenplay. So then the next step is to get it into the hands of a production and try to get it onto screen, which is a long kind of process. But yeah, I mean, that one's it's sort of comparing the coronavirus and it takes place in France, and it's the flight. It's kind of like when people left Paris to escape the coronavirus, and I'm comparing that to World War II, where people left Paris to escape the Nazis. So this is, so it's related to the present day in that it's about coronavirus, and it's about this kind of cultural shift, or like what people are doing, how are people responding, and it's tying it to something that happened in the past. So yeah.
Cool.
As for the other book that I'm writing, it really doesn't
Mhm.
have to do with present. And it's I'm writing a trilogy right now of books, and it has nothing to do with anything that's going on right now. It has to do with actually illness. So it's kind of a more timely topic, I guess, in a way.
That's cool. I was gonna ask you about, what we're working on right now. So,
Yeah, so I'm working on this trilogy. It's probably going to take me a long time to get through it. I wrote the first book last year, and then I started the second book this year. It takes place in Sicily. It starts off in Sicily, then it moves to Brazil and Uzbekistan. I don't know where I got that. Here it's going to go to Japan, probably because I want to go to Japan, but it's for some reason the story has decided it wants to go to Japan. So the characters are kind of interested in Japanese culture. So yeah, I've never been there. So
so you just go to Japan, just pack your bags and go to Japan.
exactly, why not? Where do you want to go to next? What's your
I'm actually going to Nigeria this
okay?
June, so
You are.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. One funny question: texting or talking?
Well, it depends on the situation. I mean, there are definitely situations where texting is better. I would say generally I'm more of a talker. This book is about Johnny Allen is about breaking your cell phone and seeing the world for what it is. So yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm less on technology than most people, and I actually also intentionally disengage with technology. So one day per week, I'm off completely. I'm off the grid. I don't connect at all every week, and I've been doing that for like 6 or 7 years, I guess, because we're all addicted to it in some way. I mean, you get to the point where you're just like scrolling through. I don't know if you do that. You probably don't, but you don't. Yeah, you
I try not to. My ego punishes me when I use my phone too much. I just feel like, just feel bad. I just put it down.
I love that.
Mhm. um, what I want to talk about. I have a quote for you.
Yeah.
It's from Friedrich Nietzsche. It says, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any hour." Let me say that again. He who has a why to live can bear almost any hour. What do you think about that quote?
I love that quote. I've never heard it before. Well, I'm going to ask you why you chose that quote in a second. But I mean, for me, I think it's really actually in many ways that's how I feel very, very strongly. That if you have a purpose, then you can deal with anything, really. I mean, life can be really tough, actually. But if you have something that you're, as we said before, success and all these questions that you've been asking about, I feel like if you have a reason to live and you have a purpose, then actually it makes everything a lot easier.
Yeah.
For Johnny, just to connect to Johnny, he doesn't really have that, and I think he feels a little bit lost.
Yeah.
And even though everybody else is saying he's great and whatever, he feels, I think, very. He feels like he doesn't have the root. He doesn't have that thing. So I feel like that quote that you found, I mean, this quote from Nietzsche really is important in a way to the book. It's also really important to me. Now I want to know why you chose that.
Why did I choose the quote? I mean, I just chose it to ask you a question, but I can speak on it though. I think it's a very important thing to know why, because there's this thing I think about, like death, that there's this end, right? So, and I've thought about it. So if there's an end, why bother? Why bother? Honestly, I've thought about it. Why bother to try to be successful at anything?
Yeah.
Why bother to wake up and go to work and come back?
Right.
And I think I've answered that question.
Yeah.
So my kind of why is trying to, and it sounds cliche, but like make a difference, do something.
Right.
because and I think my answer was like, okay, if you're going to die someday, you might as well do something. So that's kind of, and
Yeah.
you might as well do something that you're passionate, pas, huh?
Passionate.
passionate about, passionate about something that makes you want to wake up every day,
Right.
because you might as well do something. So that's kind of my answer to that. If I'm going to die in how many years from now,
Yeah.
I want to spend every day trying to make everything, make every day worth it.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why people say that. And the reason why these, like you say, it's kind of a cliche, but there's reason why cliches exist because they have a lot of times they speak to a greater truth.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, I mean, these are the rules of the game. We are going to die. We're going to disappear. There is a lot of pain out there and so forth. Why wake up? We have to, so in a way, if these are the rules of the game, then we have to find a way to beat the game. Kind of like you have to find a way to
Make the game interesting.
and if you can make a difference, you feel, while we're alive, we have feelings, we have these things in us. So, making a difference is certainly something that gives you a lot of purpose and meaning. I'm with you
And yeah, I would like to say you've made a difference in my life. So
thank you so much.
so yeah, and I mean that seriously. Yeah.
Working with you was a profound experience for me, and I enjoy the conversations we've had a chance to have since then. And I hope it continues. And I look forward to reading your writings because you were already off to a fabulous start with the stuff that you committed to me and showed me.
Thank you. I think this is gonna be the end, of our conversation today. And I would like to thank you for speaking with me today. This is my first time doing this, but you didn't mind. You still said yes. So so thank you. Thank you for being a great person, a good professor. Thank you for writing. And yeah, I hope you have a beautiful rest of the year, rest of the week, rest of the day.
Thanks a lot, you too. You're a natural interviewer, I think, and you ask really great questions. And I wish you the same. You're in Brooklyn right now?
Yes.
All right, cool. Stay safe and healthy.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
All right. Ding, ding, ding. That was the end.